right, we're gonna go ahead and get going here. I guess I should advance this slide to the next. All right, this is the kind of talking about our ecosystem here, and I think we can start maybe with just introductions, but really this is designed to kind of help be a roadmap for how you navigate innovation here at the University of Utah. So I'm the Associate Vice President of Research for Innovation and Commercialization at the U. I'm a urologist here, clinically male infertility. I'm also an NIH-funded researcher, and I've been here since 2013. So we'll just go down the row here. So Cord, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Cord Bowen. I'm a professor at the Eccles School of Business in the Entrepreneurship and Strategy Department. I'm also the director for the Doman Innovation Studio, which has been specifically set up to take on any venture or innovation going on campus. And we kind of we work individually in very small groups, less than 3, with researchers that are looking to commercialize.
I'm Austin Johnson. I'm an emergency medicine physician here. I have been funded by the NIH, by the DoD, even by the FDA over the years. Started some companies, sit on boards of a bunch of companies, and here at the university, one of the main things I do is help run the Applied Medical and Engineering Laboratory, which is a nonprofit that sits within the VPR's office, where we try to help people find alternative sources of funding, sort of non-NIH funding. So how do you get DoD funding? How do you get potentially SBIRs, STTRs, and things like that?
Morning, everyone. Bruce Hunter, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at the U, and I work very closely with Jim O'Tailing on the innovation and commercialization efforts. Just focus on how do we elevate the ecosystem here at the U.
Hi everybody, I'm Nelly Ulrich. I'm the Cancer Center Director here at Huntsman Cancer Institute. I'm also a researcher, and embarrassingly, I have like 4 grants, and one of them we have started to do a disclosure thing about 8 months ago, and then some things got in the way of moving that forward. So I'm all in favor of reducing barriers, making things as easy as possible for our Cancer Center members, and how can we best move innovation to both the community and the patients.
Yeah, and I think one thing we should mention too, that innovation takes a number of different forms. That first panel sort of focused on biotech, therapeutics, but we have a new building that'll be open in February, $50 million Center for Medical Innovation. I think there's incredible potential there. We also have a lot of things in the health services, like different AI tools, and we now are fielding, dozens of different companies inbound a week who want to come and be vendors for the healthcare system, both at HCI and others. And now with the fund, we have a vehicle to not only invest in those companies, but also have the health system take warrants to own more equity. Because for some of these smaller companies, like getting into a big academic medical center or a big cancer center is a huge valuation inflection point. So we're working on putting all that together. I'd say our commercialization disclosure stuff is farther along than some of the AI other things, but we are absolutely working there. So I'd like you all to maybe just answer the question of sort of 2-part question. What's the first step for a researcher with a promising idea, and how can they get the most out of some of the resources that are available? And we can kind of just go down the road.
Well, I think it's a great question, and it could probably be answered differently in each way, which is really good for the audience because everyone will approach entrepreneurship differently. One of the approaches we take is when we came in to look at the ecosystem at the University of Utah, we, and my work specifically focuses on this, is we understood that people were building a lot of mechanisms for innovation to become commercialized. But even in the perfect mechanism, perfect funding, a lot of things weren't making it through the cycle. So in our research, we start to understand that, it's not just the machine that's doing this, there's also a human being involved. So I would say that in that question where I would advise, and kind of what we work on in these rooms, is it's really a kind of a coaching platform and gives people a chance to talk about the process they're in so they don't feel like they're working in an echo chamber. So to pointedly answer the question, it really depends on what part of the process you're in when you realize you want to explore venture. I would argue get to it as early as possible. Start teaching this stuff in undergraduate, like way early, so that we can understand what the value of commercialization is, that it's a principle that involves ethics and values. It can be stewarded in a really good way. But at any point in the process, even if you have an inkling of thinking about it, this is where you want to sit in a room. You want to engage with organizations like us and just start talking about it early.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, actually.
That's why you're here.
You can take it at a lot of different levels. There's like, what are you going to do? Like, what are your nuts and bolts steps really at the university? And if that's the way I would approach this, saying, okay, I had this breakthrough in my lab. I think that there's potential here. You got to reach out across campus to understand the resources that are available, because it's really hard, right? Taking something from the laboratory all the way to the bedside is profoundly difficult. Multi-year, millions of dollars, it's hard. But there are all these people here, some of them sitting up here now, who can help you along the way. So I think TLO is one of your first places to turn, and Jim's office is another place to turn, just to understand, is this something that we need to pursue? Because you need to change your mindset from I'm innovating and I am I'm finding something completely new, to understanding is there a commercial potential there, which I will be honest, for myself, when I first started this, and I kind of got into this role, there were a few ideas I had that I thought, I'm going to be able to save lives here, that were complete dead ends because the market just wasn't there. And so there's that mind shift you have to have, and there are people up here who can help you understand that, and help you realize, is this actually worth pursuing? Because otherwise you're going to end up pursuing things that aren't necessarily successful. So I think TLO is probably, by the books, the first place to go, because you can go get some help there, and they can help you find that next step and that next person. Because in the long run, what do you want to do? You need the IP protection, but then it's all around building your team, right? And if you are a lone researcher in your laboratory, you're going to need a huge team that's going to help you be successful long term, and that's going to come through the people you know and the people you meet. And I came from Northern California, where it was just, that team was just everywhere. I feel like it's a little bit smaller here, and sometimes it helps to have some people along the way who can make those introductions and help set up those teams. So
yeah, and I would say, we work a lot with the AIM Lab, and I think DoD funding, there's huge potential, particularly in the cancer space, that probably historically our institution has not taken full advantage of. And a lot of that world is relationship driven, might be one way to put it, but we have made the full court press to get kind of tied into the various funding sources, and you can start with TLO, but you can go to the AIM Lab and other places to actually get plugged in with help for how to apply for a lot of those grants.
Yeah, and I think we talk to people at the AIM Lab of all and across the spectrum. People who are very basic science research know it's not going to be commercialized, but the DoD funds that all the time. But the DoD in general is usually funding things that are solving a problem. And they do a lot of cancer funding, traditionally through what's something called CDMRT, Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, but it's very solving a problem. It's focused, it's very translationally focused. So we will help people wherever you're at. You may be ready and you're like, we are forming a company, we're ready to go, versus some people come to us, they have had no thoughts of forming a company, and we say, really, to go be successful, we need to go form a company, and then we're going to help you through that process through other mechanisms as well. So we are one place to go, but I think TLO, by the university books, like if you're going to disclose something, TLO is a place to go. But we're going to help however we possibly can.
So, and to follow up on that, excuse me, I think that the onus is on us at TLO, because what we try to focus on is reaching out to faculty, building relationships with faculty members, building relationships with anyone who might have an innovative idea, anyone who might want to start a company. So I work very closely with Jim and my team. I see Jason. Jason, you want to stand up for a second? I'll put you on the spot here. So Jason, we're going to be walking the halls of all of the buildings. We're going to be doing everything in our power to connect with anyone who might have an interesting idea or anyone who might want to start a company. And we can't get to everyone, right, Jason? So we try to provide as many resources as we can online, and we do our best to elevate our customer service. So we want to do everything in our power to encourage you to work with us. And then when hopefully from there, we build a relationship, we build trust with you, and then I think at that point, once we have earned, so to speak, the right to interact with you, then, we want you to share your ideas with us as early as possible. And maybe you're interested in starting a company, maybe you have a technology that you're working on, but there's no such thing as being too early. We want to work with you as early as possible, and we'll do everything in our power to try to help you. We'll try to provide all the resources we can, because our goal is to make you as successful as possible.
Well, for me, it's like if somebody comes in, I'll point them to Jim and say, what do we do next? But hopefully we'll learn something more through these different sessions and pathways. I think one thing that I realized though is I think our mindset oftentimes is really too much set on like the bench to bedside. And we do have a lot with AI, with healthcare transformation. And one thing that really astounds me still is Qualtrics. I'm an epidemiologist. Doing surveys is a very basic thing. So here's a company that has made, I don't know how many millions or billions by just having a survey tool. So maybe we should all think outside the box of where are things how we could improve, right? And it doesn't have to be the brand new top idea that changes the world by bringing a new drug, which is great, which we love, right? But maybe there are other things that have to do with how can we use AI to really move something forward in very different ways, or like Qualtrics, right? Where is there a gap? And so that TLO being open-minded to such ideas, I think is going to be a key step for us going forward to really maximize the benefit from the entire cancer center membership, because there are many who are in the labs, there's some that are not. And so I'm very excited about starting this process now.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, when we look at the fund, we can make kind of the whole mechanics of the venture fund work if all we did was see every single vendor who wanted to come to the university and figure out how to selectively invest in them. The other side of that is that we want to get to the point, where like you guys are like, we need this new research tool that we can actually be part of the conversation. And I mean, there's a team of analysts at the fund. We can say, let's survey the landscape and let's see what 10 companies are doing as well. And then hopefully get to the point where we can ask and answer the question, like, Neely, to your point, like, can we do this better ourselves? How do we do that? When you talk to Taylor Randall, the president of the U, he very much feels like, and I was at dinner with him a couple months ago, he's like, look, all the pieces are here to do all these different things at the university. It's just a question of like, how do you put these pieces together? And I think there's huge potential for a lot of that. I think there's also potential, I was talking to, Brian Mitzman, one of our thoracic surgeons who does a lot of stuff with intuitive surgical. And, there's also huge potential for clinicians treating patients who come up with problems. Like when you talk to the engineers, they're like, we love working with proceduralists because they have problems and we can come up with solutions. And they're like, if you leave us to our own devices, we sometimes come up with solutions to things that aren't actually problems, which is problematic. But I think it's putting those different pieces together. So maybe we could get a little bit more into the weeds and just have, and anyone can start, but talk about what is the kind of support that's, available, like the concrete support through the Doman Center, TLO, or the Cancer Center. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just pick up on that one, because, as you're talking about engineering and bringing it together with our clinicians, we have on our internal advisory board, the Dean of the College of Engineering, we started together a new program that's now called Biceps, and basically is exactly that, seed funding for bringing clinicians or scientists together with engineers and giving them a little bit of money with the goal of either getting additional grants or a commercialization. So that has been in its second year. I've been really impressed with the progress. And so if we have more of these opportunities, or if you, as Cancer Center members, see, hey, I would love to work with this group or that group, but I don't know how to make that happen, then we can do that through seed funding, jointly or individually. It's been just really rewarding to see. Like, as Taylor says, we have all the people in place. We have a lot of very collaborative, open-minded faculty here as well. All they need is like a little bit of a carrot.
And I would say, one other thing people often don't think about is kind of the consumer product space.
Yeah.
And, for example, like there's a lot of expertise in like the games department and kind of on main campus for a number of different things. As a clinician, all of us see this. Of like, I'm tired of hearing about how like your cranberry juice is going to cure your cancer. That's probably not going to work. But I think there are opportunities, maybe it will, I don't know. There are opportunities, do you know what I mean, to use science to inform, some of that stuff that I think a lot of our clinicians don't think about because, a lot of those spaces are much less regulated, but that doesn't mean you can't bring the same level of science, to bear to a lot of those things. Austin, did you have something?
I was going to comment on the engineering, the medicine and engineering interface, because that's something, the Applied Medical and Engineering Laboratory was designed as a way to try to bring people together around these problems. I understand, especially we're farther away here, sitting in Huntsman, but being on main campus, as a clinician, you may not be, or as a scientist, you may not be down there a lot. The resources are amazing. I spend a ton of time on main campus in the engineering building, in different engineering buildings. And so we try to be a liaison for people. If you're looking for something, then we try to be a resource, right? So you want to build the next chip. We have an amazing BEMS fab, right? It's right there that a lot of people, don't know about. So, or our robotics group on campus is amazing. It's one of the best in the country, actually, for self-learning medical robotics. So we realize that it's very difficult to know what's across this campus when you're a clinician or a scientist and you're really focused on writing that next grant. And so we try to lower the barrier for that. So if you have requirements, you sort of understand the type of engineer or the mathematician or the statistician or the AI person that you're looking for, you can come to us and we're going to try to help put together a team around you.
So Jim, I think probably, for example, if you're interested in starting a company, I'm just going off my personal experience. When I started my first company, I was really driven by fear at first. I didn't know where to start. You're being hit by so many different things. You have the right idea. Is your idea going to work? So one of the things we try to do is at TLO is provide guidance, coaching in the form of mentorship to help you ground yourself in your idea, develop your business plan, and provide you some kind of guidance. I think from there, after we work with you to hone your idea and the direction you want to go, providing pitch support, because raising money is 90-95% of what every CEO does. At least that's what I spend my time doing. So helping you to help pitch your idea to the right people. We have some internal funds, we have some innovation grants, we have some seed funding to try to help as many companies as possible get off the ground. We can help with office space too. So all of the mentoring to help get you focused, the pitching of your idea and your plan in the office space. And then we also have a program for startups, and we have deals, for example, with a prominent law firm here in the area, and for a pretty reasonable fee. They'll set up your company, they'll do everything you need to do to get your company off the ground. So from my perspective, it's taking a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty, there may be some fear, and giving individuals who want to start a company a roadmap and a step-by-step process to help them move forward and build confidence and hopefully get to the point where with their idea turns into a company, the company ends up being wildly successful. So I work very closely with Jim on that. I know that's one of his areas of expertise. So
Yeah. For you.
Yeah, I can back up the structure that TLO has. It's a really robust structure. At any time you can look in, see where patents are, see where companies are, see what's happening. But I want to maybe kind of speak to this to the audience point of view, because we've had the last 2 years to work really closely with postdocs, PhD candidates, and PIs who are all in very different positions. And I would ask, and it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but wouldn't it be great if you could take a sabbatical that was focused on commercialization and you were rewarded for that? Wouldn't it be great if your efforts towards commercialization were equal to your efforts towards publishing? Wouldn't it be great if there was some accountability in the commercialization parts of the grants that you went for your research so that money was actually used and pushed towards commercialization? The thing in academics, someone asked me the other day, hey, I'd like to get this thing done. This is a really great tool. It's like, that's wonderful. You're going to have to wait 3 years. Because everybody in academics is paid to be full. All of us in this room are full. In fact, we're more than full. And we are often taking on new things, but we have to make space. And that process, in the glacial process of academics, takes about 3 years. So I think what we've been doing research on, and the report we're about to hand over, talks a lot about how you prime the pump and make this place, it does have the right pieces. It's the perfect incubator if you think about it. It's just the venture and commercialization piece isn't built into it perfectly yet. It's supported very well. And that's what we're all trying to do now, is get that last layer of support. But how do you make it a place where on day one, when you sign your employment agreement, or when you decide to do your PhD work or postdoc work, commercialization is in the language. That every chair and every dean, every department head is speaking that language and asking for it and supporting it, so that it's not this extra thing you do. You don't have to grow an extra arm, that when you walk into TLO, not only do you have the space for it, you get recognized for it. And that's kind of the biggest things that have come back to us. The entrepreneurial process is incredibly well supported. If someone has space to do it, we don't actually have to do much work. This system works great. And I mean, the money is there, the support is there, the expertise is there. So when you come in the room with us, what we're generally trying to do is, if you think about it, the kind of natural weaving that happens in academics, we're trying to weave that into what commercialization has. Change the vocabulary, the language, work on pitch decks, get people to understand that different rooms hold different values, and you might speak a little differently to that. The great thing to everybody in the room is, we're often trying to get you back to you, and that natural entrepreneurs are just inside all of us. And you're not going to have to go become something different to do this. It's just, often we're just usually giving permission. Yeah, it's okay to do it. And your instincts are the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think, how do I say this? It's okay to fail. Like 90% of startup companies fail. And that's kind of, expected. And a lot of people who have had very successful exits have had failures, along the way. And often people don't talk about that. Like, I had one of our startups that I founded get sold to a publicly traded company. I had another one raise $9 million and go bankrupt. And I think it's, it's kind of a wild ride. And I think you have to be okay, with that. And we have to have a culture where, it's like, okay, you applied for your first R01. Like, that's a huge accomplishment, even if it doesn't get funded, because you're never going to get your first R01 if you don't actually apply for it. So I think that's a really critical cultural shift, we have to make. And I would say, Cord, to your point, I mean, we had, the now head of the cancer center say, I think you should get as much credit for, a startup company as you should for a Cell Science and Nature paper. I mean, that is a paradigm shift in how we're thinking about things. We also now have chairs who have started and been recruited with packages that include commercialization, which is something that nobody, ever really thought about before. Do we have questions from the audience?
I just want to make
go ahead, Bruce.
one other point here. So for me, the most, after having been through this, most critical part of starting a company, getting comfortable with what you're doing, is you need mentors, you need mentorship, you need guidance. So for us, I mean, we work very closely with Cord, because I think that's the most important part, that initial guidance and helping entrepreneurs and people who want to start companies get their companies off the ground, but that mentorship is the linchpin. And Court, I know you do such a great job at that. So that's, I mean, that for us, that's critical.
Yeah.
That's it.
What if you have something you have patented and you don't want to start a separate company that you think, you know, it could go to a pharma company or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start and then I'll sort of hand it over to Bruce, but there is a whole team of people who go to like conferences all over the country from TLO who shop that technology around. And it's a really good point because some faculty don't want to do a startup, or sometimes it's not a big enough market, you know, where a startup makes sense. But there's a whole team of people who like that is basically their full-time job to sort of help with some of that technology.
That's right, Jason. That really is your team on the life sciences side. And we have a pretty rigorous process. So if technology comes in, we look at the landscape for intellectual property. We look at the landscape for commercialization and the opportunities to license the technology. We have a pretty strong marketing engine, and we got a great team of people to try to take that technology. You don't want to do a startup, and try to find the best licensing candidate for the technology. And I know that in the pharma space, you're really good at that, Jason, you and your team.
Yeah.
And then how can I tell if it's good enough to, you know, I pitched it, I pitched some of my ideas, and then they say, oh, you have to wait to do the animal studies and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I have, you get a grant and, you know, I did something in zebrafish, but I haven't really fully worked it out in mice. And so how do I know, should I keep going? Do I have to have the animal study done before I come to you?
I think that's a really good question. I would just say, I think the key there goes back to like the relationship with the office and like the dialogue, and just reach out. And some of this stuff is like, you can't like look at some Excel spreadsheet and figure out, it has to be a conversation. I think the offices have a lot of ways to bring in, you know, expertise and figure out what to do. An example is that like Project Galen slide I talked about at the beginning, that project was born out of like us sitting down with a bunch of former C-suite people from billion-dollar like drug discovery companies and saying, here are kind of the resources across the university, like what makes sense. But I think it's one of those, it's like what I tell my patients. So I do men's health, and I always, before I operate, like look at usually the patient's partner and say, okay, like if there's some issue, you need to make sure that you actually contact me and let me know, because they never will. But like I think over communicating, you know, on that front is really helpful.
Okay, and I guess no offense to anyone, the tech transfer office has changed
Yep.
so many times that I don't even know who I should be contacting.
Yeah, well, I think what we can do is have you meet Jason after the meeting, and he can give you his, you know, email, phone number, all that stuff, and that's the easiest way to do it. And it has changed a lot. It's been pretty stable for probably 2.5 years, and we have gone from, I think, 260 disclosures, which is one of the metrics, to over 500. And I think a lot of that has been from forming better relationships with faculty and treating faculty like they are the customers, you know, not outside entities.
So Jason, can you go up and speak with her, you know, as soon as we're done here? So people come and go from tech transfer offices. One of the things that's really important is we try to build a very strong operational foundation with very strong business processes, so that the level of support, the level of customer service we provide, no matter who's doing the job, it stays the same throughout the process. And just one more point about de-risking technology for pharma. My experience has been, it also, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it also depends upon, you know, which pharmaceutical company you're speaking with. I mean, each company has a different strategic directive. They have different goals, and we may pitch something to one company and they may not have any interest. You may pitch something to another company that's right in their sweet spot, their strategic wheelhouse, and they may be interested.
Yeah, and the other thing is we also track everything. We know the response time, we're benchmarked against the response time. And, you know, when we delved into it, like initially the problem was us, like we weren't responding to stuff. This was probably 2.5 years ago. And now when we delve into it, you know, sometimes like we drop the ball, but also it's, you know, sometimes it's the back and forth with the faculty that can take a while. And to Court's point, you know, and I think all of us would echo this, it's like we're trying to figure out the way to carve out the time to do that. We have this new microgrant program, which is, I guess, in aggregate about an $800,000 initiative. And effectively, you can apply for these grants. They're small, you know, they're $10,000 grants that we put in, but they're matched. They can get matched by ARUP, the Cancer Center, College of Science, Engineering, a couple other things I can't even, molecular medicine, School of Medicine. So, I mean, you could be talking about $30,000 to $50,000, but that money is just to take the research that you're doing and move it in a commercial direction. So instead of saying like, yeah, take your R01 grant and like generate some intellectual property, it's to say, okay, well, you're doing X, this is really cool. Keep doing that amazing science that you're doing. We're gonna give you some more funds to fund like part of the time of a graduate student or a postdoc to try to take that in a commercial direction. And we're gonna work with you to try to shape that from the beginning. So let's see, do we have other questions? Yeah.
I just like to have more comment. As someone in that area of that field.
Get that like last bit of translational data you might need. So that, you know, this is the plug for the AIM Lab that we put on a competition every year. This year it's called High Tech West. The last couple of years it's been called the Rack Grant Challenge, but it's a 2-day competition for up to, we provide $1 million of funding across several teams. And it's very translationally based. So it's it's really to get you that bit of funding that gets you to that next step. Several groups have used it. There's a company that actually spun out of last year's rack that's probably gonna get acquired like about 18 months later. We provided them with just that, you know, this is what they needed to get that first prototype done. And so there's some opportunities like that from campus. So that's on our webpage now. It's going live. It'll be the end of February. The interesting thing about that competition is it's actually a live pitch event. So you actually have to pitch like a company. And so I spend several hours with every single team, like doing pitch coaching one-on-one with them and going over your slides and helping you think about your markets, et cetera. So you get a little, if you get accepted into it to pitch, you get some one-on-one. And not that I'm like the best pitch coach, but I've done a lot of pitches, raised a lot of money. So that's one opportunity. The other thing I'll say is when you start to push towards, it's other forms of money, right? So your R01 might not fund it, but you can get an SBIR or an STTR, right? And so we're building resources here on campus to help you do that. And then I'll come back, it's a broken record, but there are a lot of very innovative ways to use non-NIH and non-traditional funding to fund things on campus that are very commercial.
Yeah, and we also have, you know, we're now doing with a couple companies these IP-free zones where an outside company can come work with the university. University takes a little bit of equity in the company, 0.5% to 1%. But in exchange for that, that company can partner kind of with anyone across the university, and all the IP terms are spelled out in advance. And that can do it. I think another thing a lot of PIs don't realize is that it is not only perfectly acceptable, but encouraged for you to form a startup company, raise money in the startup company, and fund research in your lab. You can absolutely do that. And
that's an STTR.
That is an
STTR.
Or it could be, you know, institutional money or industry money. Like we have a new company called Calicia, which is a collaboration with Nina Rowe Johnson, who's a biochemist, and Sam Cheshire, who's one of the pediatric neurosurgeons, and it's like CAR macrophage therapy, so you use macrophages to treat glioblastoma. And same thing as Austin, like I spent a lot of hours with them, like taking the hour-long scientific talk and getting it into like 10 slides. But they ultimately raised like, I think about $500,000. And I think Daniel went through the Doman Center twice to sort of do the pitch, but they're now, you know, moving things forward. But that money that was raised into the company can fund people in the on the university side. But that's kind of an example of
Yeah,
And to that, go ahead.
let's say, and Daniel, who we just mentioned, worked with us, and we were able to align and work on the deck and make sure that it was the right language for funding. But also, I think in the next year, you'll probably see Daniel up in front of groups like this talking about this process. I think two really good questions that come up about how you clarify your work and get it to that stage. I'm going to tell everybody in the room, it's always fuzzy. And I think this is a really great advice. You just have to take the step, change the vocabulary, and it is true new sources of funding will become available under different terms and definitions.
And I think the other big shift, like one of the startups that Brad and I has about 18 employees, probably 2/3 of them are former PhDs and postdocs from the U. And it's a mental shift to go from NIH funded science to be like, this is really interesting. We're going to show that this is 1,000% true. Do you know what I mean? And then take this to something else. So go to a company where it's like, we had to sit all these people down and be like, look, this is like, you guys figure out some minimum viable product, like concept here for this in 6 months where no one has a job. And that's scary to people, but that's, you know, I mean, you kind of have to get used to building a plane while flying it, or vice versa. And that can be really scary, but it can also be fun. And I think you're also fortunate in that you can absolutely do that and still have your job in academics with like the healthcare and other stuff. And a lot of these CEOs who are jumping out and doing this, I mean, it's a high reward, but very high risk as well.
And to answer the other part of your question, you know, like you have a full-time job and say, well, how am I going to start a company? I work very closely with Jim on helping entrepreneurs put a management team in place, right? So we have a pretty strong program for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know, Neely, do you have other comments on kind of, no?
I think this was really enlightening, so thank you. I think it's also great to hear, like, you know, it sounds like there are a lot of already initiatives, right? There's ideas, and then it really seems to be this bridge of what happens next and how do we get these preclinical data. And, you know, we honestly, I mean, the incentives from the university are for NIH funding, right? Mm-hmm. There's also a goal of, you know, like a 500 billion or whatever.
Yeah.
I should know it, but anyway, there's like a lot of specific goals also for promotion, for the Cancer Center Support Grant and others that are focused on NIH funding. But it is becoming more and more important to have commercialization also as part of that. And I'm very glad to hear that that's part of the, you know, the chair's thinking too.
Yeah.
Because if we want to do additional funding of key work, we need to have the incentives in place, we need to have things in place that everybody can work together to move that forward. It has been
the president wants us to have 25 startups a year. Last year I think we had 7, but there's now 18 that are in like various, you know, stages of forming and moving forward. I think there's like tremendous potential. Like I said, if you take away one thing from this is that there are a lot of resources out there to help you do this stuff. But we're not there yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one sentence about this. Forming a company, you need the CEO, CFO, someone who does the books, private tax.
No, that's a great question. You do, if you're raising venture money, you need all of that. But for a lot of these things, you need like an LLC to apply for an SBIR, an SSTR grant. And the AIM Lab, TLO, my office, Court, there's a number of resources for you to help do that. You don't need all that stuff. I mean, I could go online and make an LLC in like an hour, you know, and I think it's like $80.
I would just
to manage the company once.
Yeah.
For the SBIR, for all this.
Yeah.
Do you have a mechanism for that?
There are plenty. So you know, I don't want to disagree with Jim, but I would talk to some people before you go form an entity, because sometimes some entities are a better business entity than others. So LLCs are great, they're cheap, they're quick. Sometimes, you know, starting a C Corp is better out of the gate. The overall costs of running it don't have to be that expensive, right? You can get a fractional CFO who manages your books and does your taxes, and that stuff it's a lot easier than you might think when you're sitting there and like, how do I actually do that? We can help you put that team together.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard, and we can help you sort of figure out what is needed, what entity is needed in a legal structure. All right, we are about. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think there's just one thing that's very important.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is just the beginning of the series
Yeah.
of activities, because it sounds like there are a lot of specific questions, including like what are barriers and how can we overcome them. So maybe this is time to pitch the next event.
Yes. Yeah. So we have another. I have to remember exactly what day it is. October 6th. Thank you very much. There's a lot of different events, but October 6th to actually take a deeper dive. And it's like a half day, and it actually will walk you through all the different steps of forming a company and go into this stuff in more detail. But thank you all for attending, and hopefully it was informative. So thanks very much.
So I'll hang around. Jim, I know Jason is here, Steven, who recently joined us. If anyone has any questions, if there's anything we can help you with, we're more than happy to stay as long as you'd like. So thank you.